So the president had his State of the Union address this week. I thought it was a good speech. You know, I don't agree with everything the Trump administration is doing as a matter of policy or politics, but I mean, you don't want to hear about my disagreements on policy. Those are all personal. You know, Judicial Watch's attitude is, what about the rule of law? Are we being transparent? Is the administration following the law? Are we advancing the interests of the United States in terms of the Constitution and protecting the rights of citizens? These are the sorts of things a public interest educational foundation like Judicial Watch would be interested in. So to that end, I was very pleased by the president's speech because he spoke about the border security crisis in a way that no president has in a generation. It's a rule of law crisis. It is an existential threat to the future of our nation, having this unsecure border. It victimizes, and this is what I especially like because you may have heard me talk about this, he highlighted the fact that it is not a virtue, it is not compassion to have open borders. If you value the humanity of illegal aliens, you want to shut down the human trafficking operation that victimizes them, and obviously victimizes innocent Americans as well, but it's a twofer if you've got border security. You're protecting Americans and you're protecting illegal aliens who are being victimized by the human trafficking operations run by the narco-terrorist drug cartels that are controlling virtually all of Mexico. You know, and the left would have you believe there's no crisis. I just love the media telling us, well, you know, they're only arresting so many, apprehending so many individuals at the border. They used to apprehend a lot more. It used to be a lot more people trying to cross the border illegally. So 400,000 crossing the border illegally isn't a crisis because there was a time when there 1 million people were crossing the border illegally. And so if you call it a crisis, you're being misleading. That's the fact-check world of the liberal media establishment. It is a crisis. And it's not only a crisis because of the sheer volume of numbers that we have no way of curtailing effectively because we have no security, but also the specific quality or backgrounds of the individuals crossing the border. Too many are criminals and too many are associated with terrorist activity. And I don't say that lightly. And I say that based on, again, government information. The Department of Homeland Security has detailed that there were over 3,000 special interest aliens run into at the border by their people last year. And those are only the ones they caught. Now, what is a special interest alien? Well, they're not a special interest alien because they've got interesting hobbies or fascinating personalities. It's because they're potential terrorists, to be blunt. The definition of a special interest alien generally is a non-U.S. person based on an analysis of travel patterns potentially poses a national security risk to the United States or its interests. Often such individuals or groups are employing travel patterns or evaluated to probably have a nexus to terrorism. DHS analysis includes an examination of travel patterns, points of origin, and/or travel segments that are tied to current assessments of national and international threat environments. This does not mean that SIAs, special interest aliens, are terrorists, quote unquote, but rather that the travel and behavior of such individuals indicates a possible nexus to nefarious activity, including terrorism, and at a minimum provides indicators that necessitate heightened screening and further investigation. The term SIA does not indicate any special derogatory information about the individual, so don't read into anything more into it than what DHS says. A general concern that this individual needs a second thorough investigation because he's acting in a way that causes national security alarms to go off. So don't tell me that 3,000 of these, I mean, just think of that, 3,000 that need to be investigated for possible terrorism ties because of their threat activity. Does DHS have the resources to do even thorough vetting there? Of course not. And these, again, are the people who are caught, not the ones who make it across the border, because we have no fence, and the best that DHS or Border Patrol or ICE can do is watch them cross and then maybe go there later to see if there are any others that they pick up at the point that they've watched others cross into. It's a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare on the border. And our Congress continues to dither. I don't know what Congress is going to come up with in terms of a plan that the president will sign on to. You know, the president only wants to build. He wouldn't hear this from the media. His proposal was only to build 234 miles of border wall. Now, what is it, a 2,000-mile border? I don't think every mile of that border needs a wall, but certainly it needs more than 234 miles. And yet the open borders crowds in both parties really aren't interested in doing that. And obviously the Democrats, for whatever reason, politically have decided they don't want a border wall at all. Now, they may come off of that a bit. So I suspect what will come out will be something that looks like a wall for, you know, a few dozen miles. Better than nothing, but not sufficient. And this is why I've highlighted that the president should deploy the military on the border to secure it, because the wall isn't going to be built for a while, even if it's, assuming it's approved at all, but the military can be there tomorrow. So I wanted to highlight this issue because the media just doesn't tell you about it. There are thousands and thousands upon daily of individuals we have no clue about who are crossing the border. And our folks can only pick up a few. And frankly, the ones who are picked up oftentimes are released into the interior of the United States. Don't tell me it's not a crisis. It is a crisis. Well, there's a crisis now. Speaking of crises, there's a crisis for, so just to be clear, I don't say this because I read about it in a newspaper. Our team has been on the border repeatedly. There's been few other groups out there that have done more Freedom of Information Act, litigation, and investigation, generally, on border and the illegal immigration crisis than Judicial Watch. But we've gone to court to try to stop sanctuary policies. We have that big case now, a major case in San Francisco, on behalf of a taxpayer trying to end the deadly, dangerous sanctuary policy in San Francisco. That case goes to trial in July, or it's scheduled to go to trial in July. Our folks were in Guatemala looking at the caravans. There are more caravans coming up. And we told you initially what the truth was. It wasn't women and children. It was all about young men, many of whom were criminals, and, quote, special interest aliens, other than Mexicans is the phrase, or other than Central Americans is the phrase, from places like Bangladesh and places where Islamic extremism is on the rise or a major issue in terms of terrorism. So Judicial Watch has been on the front lines on this. And I suggest to you, before I move on to this next point, you've got to let your members of Congress know what you think about these border issues, about the illegal immigration crisis. Because if left to their own devices, they will pretend to secure the border while granting amnesty to millions of illegal aliens. But that's the likely outcome absent intervention from an upset populace. That's the likely outcome. And I know President Trump doesn't necessarily buy into the full amnesty agenda, but you know, he may be interested in allowing some amnesty in exchange for better border security. And I think that would be a terrible mistake. Amnesty undermines the rule of law. It encourages more illegal immigration. And I guarantee you we'll get the amnesty, but we won't get the necessary border security that supposedly will be dangled in front of us in exchange for the amnesty.